Again, what we're going to be talking about is building a people-first hiring strategy for growth. And the topic today started with my work with Angela Chrisman. Angela and I had a couple of different conversations that actually started here at a Club E session. And a lot of different things start here. I've had co-founders get together here. I actually introduced a couple that ended up getting married, and there's all kinds of good stuff that happens here. Today's topic is one of those. Angela and I started talking about this topic, and that developed into what we have today. So Angela Chrisman is founder of Lift Bridge Strategy, a business that she started last year in 2022, but she's been doing this work for a long, long time at some very well-known named companies, and so her experience is fabulous, and she helps companies grow with human capital strategies. And then Jolly Nanda is founder of the Vikradi Management Consulting group that she started in 2015, and she aligns teams and sets them up to succeed in a competitive and evolving marketplace. And we all know what we're in right now is very competitive and very much evolving, in some respects almost seemingly like day to day. And so Angela and Jolly, thank you very much for joining us. And then Angela, why don't we start with you? Just give us a little bit more background on yourself and your practice, and tell me more.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, thanks so much for the introduction, Rick. I'm super excited to be here today. And as Rick said, I've had experience working in HR for a long time, almost 20 years, which I can't believe how quickly that's gone by. But actually started out with a really small business, a small family business early on. I grew up in that, and then pursued a career in HR and spent, a long time with Walmart, several years with Marvin, and then decided to start my own consultancy. So I focus on people strategy. So anything related to talent and culture is the way to think about it. Really non-traditional approaches to HR, which we'll talk about today, and then some leadership development. But you should tell us about you, Jolly.
Well, thank you, Angela. Thanks for coming out here on such a beautiful day and being indoors when we should all be outdoors. I have two companies, Vikradi Management Consulting, that focuses on basically providing change management consulting. But what we really do is focus on building strategies and making it executable. Anything to do with growth transformation, human resources transformation as well. But we also have a significantly large offering within the life sciences and healthcare space, where we help smaller companies commercialize their new and innovative products. And the other company we just spun that out. It's called Althea Inc. It is a predictive health analytics platform that is basically focused on providing predictive health analytics that will help with intelligent prioritization for care management. That's what we do.
Cool, very cool. Well, again, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us today. Appreciate it very, very much. Why don't we start with kind of a foundational question and just almost like a look back. Obviously, COVID changed the rules in many, many different ways. Tell us a little bit about what maybe changed since then. So we've got a couple of years on this side of it. How is the human capital HR world different today than it was a handful of years ago?
Well, I'll take a stab at that first. So I think, during COVID, or, what the basically did was, it basically changed everyone's life, right? But in terms of how people work and having a hybrid work environment is really driving a lot of change, and still is, with the conversations of, are people coming back to work full time? Will people even want to do that? What roles, can do that and what roles can't? And the focus on how do you sustain a company culture in a hybrid environment? How do you drive productivity as well? And how do you, still collaborate? And I think, there's more of a focus now than ever before on mental health of employees. I think employers are now more focused and more in touch with, the need to provide services to their employees to handle stress. The other thing I notice more and more is the focus on DEI that has significantly changed. And I think, the pandemic drove that because, as a society, it highlighted the disparities. And now I think, a lot of companies are focusing on ensuring that they have a fair and, just D&I system.
Yeah, all of those points are certainly spot on. And then there's this overarching theme of the shift in the market from it being super employer driven to being super employee driven. And the fact that employers used to sort of hold all the cards, right? They could decide where people came to work, when they came to work, how they got their work done, how much they were going to pay for that work. And what happened is that's really shifted. And now employees have more say in where they work and how they work and the sort of work they do and how much money they make. So that's driving a lot of shift. And there's really a need for not only a shift in strategy, but also a shift in just leadership approach, right? And mindset in thinking through how do you adapt to all of these different folks' needs rather than, sort of more traditional one size fits all ways of leading people and getting work done. So
go back to the hybrid and people wanting to go back to the office. I hear that one a lot. So maybe anecdotal, of course, but what percent would you say everybody's gone back to how it was pre-COVID versus a hybrid versus they decided they aren't going to go back at all? What are you seeing? And again, not a scientific study, not a right answer, but what are you seeing in that front?
Yeah, I think it's really dependent on the work environment, right? There are some jobs where people never worked from home. They stayed working in roles that required them to be on site. So we can't forget about that group as well. And then it seems there's also a large proportion of people that are hybrid to some degree, and it's all over the map, right? It's informal programs where they might have an agreement with their employer where they work from home most of the time, but it's not the company practice, or they might work from home 1 day a week or 3 days a week. There's just a lot of different things happening and a lot of customization. What we keep hearing over and over again is that CEOs want everyone to come back, right? That's a trend and definitely something that we've been hearing a lot. And what you see is that employees are saying, well, hold up, we're okay with coming back some of the time, but don't think that we're going to come back all of the time. And that's the most common trend, is that tension between what leaders feel is really necessary for culture versus what employees are wanting to do.
Yeah, I think I'd add to that is, with the downturn of the economy as well, I think there's going to be another shift where it's going to change back to an employer's world where they can demand, certain things about coming back to work. And it really is role focused. I know that, like, if you look at even Mayo Clinic, where, of course, the people, the service providers, the healthcare providers have to come in. But a lot of their administrative staff is all remote, and they've made a decision that they're going to stay that way. But when you talk to the people that are actually doing the work, they do voice concern that, hey, I miss coming into the office, so it'd be great if I came in, even if it was just, a day a week. So we're kind of seeing that whole spectrum where people still want the flexibility, and in some cases, the employers really do want them all to come back.
Great. Okay, thanks for sharing that. All right, so we interacted some with some questions and outlined some stuff for today. As a business owner and folks who are trying to grow their businesses, what should they be thinking about when they need to basically prep for hiring people and building a strategy around hiring people? What should folks be thinking about now?
So I think, it all starts from the business that you have, right? What are your products? What is your strategy? What's your mission, vision? And from there, what are your growth plans? So there are some functions that you will always have: marketing, operations, legal, all of those things, HR. And, your growth plans and your strategy will drive what you need and potentially, how you're going to get that. But as you're thinking about it, and as you're thinking about growth and the people strategy, I think you have to have what your mission, your vision, and your brand is. You have to know that, because and the culture that you want to have within the company, because as soon as you start hiring, obviously, you're introducing people in, it's going to evolve. And that, if you don't have a vision of what that is, then you have you can't get your arms around, how do you want that interaction with the client to look like? What do you want the clients to say about you? Those are some things that, you have to know before you start to grow and add people.
I think it's also important to think about how you grow in ways that you maintain resilience with expansions and contractions in the economy, right? So as you think about increased needs, be it for capability or capacity, thinking through, does that mean people? We often jump to hiring people, right? That's the first thing that we think, and in what capacity? It could mean that you need new technology to support what you need to achieve. It could be that you need a contract partner to help you to achieve what you need and to add capability to your business. So I think just really being thoughtful in the steps before you get to the point of developing a hiring strategy is really important. And that's why we often talk about it as a people strategy, and thinking about it in terms of adding capability, so that you take a step back and don't just jump to hire. Because as we've seen recently, we have some companies who grew a lot and really got ahead of their skis. And as a result of that, we're seeing some layoffs in the market and things like that. So also really important things to think about before you ever get to hiring.
Sure. I mentioned the culture at Irish Titan when I introduced Tia, and Darren definitely has a kind of person that he wants for his team. How does a business owner decide what types of people that they should be adding? Darren is kind of an extreme in that he's just an extreme, but he also wants what he wants, and there's definitely a vibe and a culture. Not all businesses are like that. What should business owners, business leaders be thinking about when they have to decide what type of people to bring in?
Yeah, so Jolly talked about being really clear on your mission and vision, and a build on that is being really clear about your brand. And your brand and the way that you show up externally with your customers should be the same as your brand and the way that you show up internally with your team members. And you want your team to be really good, to portray that brand well and to represent it really well. And so you need to be really thoughtful about what sort of culture do I want to create? What sorts of talent and capabilities do I need? But what do I want my culture to be like tied to my brand? And make sure that you're thinking about people who fit that, right? And represent that brand well.
Well, as an entrepreneur, I think you have to look at, what skills do you need on the team, but you also have to have diversity. So get people that are different than you are. And it's not, the DEI spectrum, but really different in viewpoints, so that whatever you're working on can be more robust by that diversity of thought. So get people that have skills that you don't have, that you can work with, and that you can truly partner with and trust.
You mentioned getting ahead of a company getting out over their skis too much and then having to lay people off. Talk a little bit about the different models on adding people: full-time employees, contractors, partnerships. Talk a little bit about what are the different options and what folks should think about when deciding which path to choose.
Sure. So I think, you should only look at, first when you develop your growth strategy and your plans, you really have to understand, what you need, how many, from a capacity perspective. And as Angela said, you need to be able to pivot. So there's a foundational piece that you need, where you have to have foundational capabilities that you should focus on trying to get, really the W-2s. But in a lot of cases, you have capabilities that you can hire from either fractional companies that offer that fractionally, or services that are offered on the cloud that provide the technology and the service combined. And you can do that. And then you also have the 1099 route, and then partnerships. So just as an example, Angela and I are partners, and for a lot of our larger programs, we partner together to deliver functionality and capability, and it's a really good way to be able to flex, but also bring the best of capabilities to your clients. And I personally, as an entrepreneur, lean towards partnerships and 1099 heavily, because that's what my brand stands for, is to bring the best and the best. So if I can't retain, the volume that I need from a W-2 perspective for the right talent, I'm able to acquire that through partnerships and 1099s for when I need it.
Yeah, and the resilience piece is really important too, and thinking about when you add W-2 folks and how you think about 1099 and partnership versus, and by resilience, I mean managing those fluctuations in business. The other thing to think about, because I think sometimes there's a tendency for entrepreneurs to do as much as they can do themselves, right? It's work I can do, I just keep taking on more and more and more. And they don't always think about what could I be doing if I weren't doing those things, and how you can leverage resources. It's a really common thing now to have even a virtual admin, a part-time administrative assistant who takes on the calendar management and some of the things that you might otherwise spend your time doing, marketing work, right, that you might spend your time doing today, or even some HR things that you might spend your time doing today that you could be adding more value in your business and growing it in other ways if you took on other folks to help you even part-time.
How about the process by which you need to go through to attract the right people? What in this world should folks be doing so that they attract the right people?
So this has changed a lot over the last several years, and it's really, the way that I like to think about it is that HR and recruitment is a lot more like marketing than it is traditional HR. So if you were taking a new product to the market or a new service to the market, you would make sure you had a really deep understanding of your customer and their needs. Where do they hang out? What are the best channels? What message is going to resonate? What problem am I solving for them? And you really need to approach talent and recruitment in the same way. So who am I trying to attract, right? That goes back to the first question that we talked about. What sorts of talent do I need? What are they looking for? That's part of this aspect of shift that I talked about a little bit earlier too, is really understanding how you're going to meet their needs. A lot of people say, we offer great benefits. We're going to go to the market and we're going to talk about all of our great benefits, without really understanding if those are the things that resonate with the audience and those are the things that they're looking for. So headline is, think about it like you would attracting customers for products and services.
I'd add on to that, because we do a lot of persona work for when we are trying to recruit the right talent, and that's really, really helpful to hone in on exactly what you're looking for, but also what do you think that persona is looking for from you. And it's great from a marketing perspective where you can market your brand, you can market your values, but the only way to retain that talent when they come in is they have to believe it and they have to feel it when they come in and experience it. And if the values of what you're marketing is different than when what is internal and actually reality in your company, I think retention becomes a really, really big issue. So the one thing that you have to tie as part of, this whole how do you sell and, get a candidate in is to also weave in, well, what is that, employee experience, and tie it all together so that it's consistent.
So, go ahead.
No, and even when the market is, not as strong for some, and there are layoffs in the news, the best talent always have options, right? That's another thing to always remember, and they tend to vote with their feet, right? So, really important.
You brought up, Angela, brands and view it kind of like marketing your products. Talk a little bit about how somebody should tell their brand story as it relates to hiring, and maybe Jolly, whoever wants to tackle it first. Where it came up, I just wanted to see how you tie that in with the recruiting and the people side of things.
Yeah, so the first thing is to really understand what part of your story resonates with which audience, and making sure that you tell the story that's going to resonate with the audience in a really authentic way that matches what they're going to experience when they come in the door. And then to meet them where they are, get a good feeling for where they spend their time, who they spend their time with. Think about, not only, there's a tendency to also think through the lens of, well, I hang out on these social channels, and so do most of the people who work here, therefore everyone must. When there's a whole other audience out there, people who are, maybe spending more time on TikTok than they are on LinkedIn, right? And so how do you think about really meeting people where they are in different channels and telling your story in a way that resonates with them? So
I think a lot of people, when you talk about brand, they think about brand as something that it's a product or a service that you're trying to market, versus there's a brand individually that we all have, right? And, as we come together in a company, like I said, we have to kind of align on what that brand is. And everyone should be able to tell that story. And it has to, like you said, Angela, be authentic, because people can tell when it's not. And I think that there are a bunch of just words and pretty pictures, but it's the feeling that you can pass on that really makes the difference. And so if you focus on telling your story when you're hiring people, or when you're pitching your business or pitching to a client, it's going after what is it that you want them to feel. And I think that is the most important thing also when it comes to your talent strategy, is how do you want your people to feel?
One more thing? Okay. We are hearing more and more from people in the market that they want to take roles and go to companies where they feel like they're part of something bigger and where they're contributing to a larger purpose. So I think it's really, really important to be clear when you go to market to recruit people to work with you or for you, that you're really clear about what is your purpose and how does it connect to a bigger picture. And then how, in whatever role they would be playing within that, how does their role tie directly back to that, right? That's a really important part of the story too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, as what we've seen is like the newer generation coming into the workforce, what's important to them is that mission-driven purpose. And the older generation, I think we're in the mid, we're more craving that flexibility and stability. But I think, the focus now is, has to be mission-driven.
One of the questions I like asking here is mistakes that you see made most often give it to everybody here so that hopefully they can avoid them. Not that anybody here would be making any mistakes, but if you can shed a little light on maybe some of the things that you've learned along the way, and then maybe some of the pitfalls that you see commonly occur that the folks here might be able to avoid.
Wow, shoot, I've made a lot of mistakes.
Which one?
I know. Where do I start? The list is really long. So I think, I'm going to do it from a perspective of an entrepreneur. I think, Angela mentioned one of the pitfalls mistakes is when you go in and you think, well, I know I can do X, Y, and Z, right? And you try to do it all. And that's really, really a pitfall, because you really should focus on, where do you bring value versus where can, the other folks bring greater value to then enhance, the overall value of whatever that service or company or even the brand is. And so I think that was the biggest learning that I had while growing, I guess. And then the other thing is to be able to leverage, the various options of bringing in people. So I made the mistake of first thinking, okay, well, I really needed to get a lot of W-2s going, right? And I learned that it wasn't sustainable. It's expensive. Retention is hard. And as a small company, the competition is just massive, especially when, a lot of folks aren't willing to just work for, equity or future promise of reward. So I think, pivoting to the partnerships and the 1099s and, creating those flexible packages of, what's important to people. What we found out, or what I've personally found out, is, there's some people that actually want that permanent W-2 employees. There's some people, they're at that stage in their career, they want to be a partner to you. They want, a 1099 arrangement because they want flexibility. And being able to recognize and have that conversation and, coming to an arrangement, again, flexibility is key. And knowing that earlier on would have been awesome. Those are the two things that I think are most important to me.
I think when it comes to offerings of products and services and what people need, or whether it comes to recruitment and trying to attract talent, every time I assume that I know what other people want or need or what they're looking for without asking, it's usually off to some measure. It's really, really important to ask and understand, and always have your end user in mind, whether that's a customer or a talent you're trying to recruit, but just really having a good understanding of that and what you're offering, and how it relates to what they need.
Great, thank you. Obviously, there's been a lot of lessons for both of you over the course of your career. For folks out here thinking about various human capital strategies, if there was kind of one thing maybe that you might say, hey, this is a little bit more important than some of the other items, what might that be?
For me, it's just remembering that although we've seen recent shifts in the market where, we're seeing things get a little bit softer with some layoffs and things like that, people's expectations have changed forever, and top talent will always have options. That's a really, really important thing to remember. And from a retention standpoint, you sort of hold the cards in the sense that other people who are outside, who are trying to recruit people away from your organization, they shouldn't know them as well as you do, right? If you have really, really good connections with your people and understand what they need and want and how they want to grow and what their preferences are, you should be able to retain them. You should have a leg up on anyone who's trying to poach them, right? So it's remembering that top talent will always have options. So don't feel like, oh, gee, we can start to, maybe move back in the direction of some older ways of doing things because the market's shifting and people are going to want to stay where they are, because that's not necessarily true. And then just you have that connection with your people internally, and really to make sure that you keep that going. That's the key to retention, really.
Yeah, I think it ties towards, what do people value too? And again, a lot of people value the opportunity for development and growth, right? And as long as you provide them those opportunities in-house, they're not going to go external. So, really combining, your leadership and, learning and development organization with a really robust talent mobility program, I think is, key to make sure that you're growing your people. And when they see that there's an investment and, being made, they're less likely to leave, especially the top talent, because they're the ones that, you really, really want to invest in and have them stay.
Absolutely.
So the opposite of that, and you touched on it a little bit earlier, and we focused just for a moment on coming back to it, about business kind of gets ahead of itself a little bit over its skis. Right now, the economy's shaky, things are up, things are down. What does the business do if they need to retract and they find that they have more talent and people than they need? What would some best practices be for those folks to do, and things to think about?
So I think, obviously, we're experiencing that right now. So there's rifts happening all over the place. But an alternative to that is looking at, whether you can redirect some of this talent to core, I would say, infrastructure-like projects that build and enhance and solidify that foundation that you built, so that when, there's going to be a turning point. We don't know when. It could be 12 months from now. It could be 18. It could be 24. It could be 3 years. But we believe that if you redirect that talent and focus on those foundational things, when the economy turns, then they'll be much better positioned as a company, right, to move things forward. So some of those things could be, looking at your operational efficiencies, and, redoing and remapping all of your processes, roll out lean, do some continuous improvement work, because that takes a lot of effort. I don't know how many of you have actually rolled up your sleeves and done that. It's grunt work. But it needs to be done, and this is the opportune time to do it when you do have bandwidth.
Yeah, I think in the last couple of years, the growth has been almost sort of frenetic in some ways, and people have been sort of just all over the place and scurrying and trying to get as much done as they possibly can in a short time. And so, to your point, the foundational pieces that ultimately help to either drive efficiency or move a business forward have maybe fallen to the wayside a little bit in some cases. And if someone finds himself in a situation, or a company finds himself in a situation where there really is no alternative to, a RIF or to laying people off, it's really, really important to be human about it, right? And to think about how you would want to be treated. It's the right thing to do for people. We've all seen these companies in the news where there have been some things that have really gone sideways, and we all go, why would you ever treat someone that way, right? So it's just really, really important to be human. And then to always be thinking about, how did we end up in this position, right? How do we build our organization for better resilience in the future, where we can manage contractions without having to let people go? And we've talked about some of the ways of doing that, right? Through thinking about part-time or gig work or 1099 or all of these different things. But there are ways to build organizations to be resilient, and there's a workforce available that, gosh, I don't remember there ever being such a large workforce of people who wanted to work part-time and do gig work and 1099 and fractional work. They're out there. Leverage them so that you don't end up in that position.
What about somebody who's looking for a job right now, given the dynamics of the marketplace and where employers are at and uncertainty in the economy? If somebody's wanting to make a change right now, what are the best ways for them to go about that search?
I think be really clear about what you want to do, what the work that you want to do is, and how the work that you want to do or that you're doing aligns with what a company's needs are in a way that is relevant to whatever their current business situation is, right? So having a really good understanding of the company, what their needs are, and then thinking about how you can add value and deliver on that. And then the other piece is networking. New jobs come through people you know often, right? Building a network, reaching out to people who you know, who know people who maybe work at a company that you're interested in working in, but really making it about the value that you bring and solving their challenge. I know I probably sound like a broken record because this is kind of the inverse of what I said before, but the same is true, right? If you're looking for a job, think about the problem you are going to solve for the company, not what the company can do for you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think also that, as candidates, we need to be flexible. Mm-hmm. The market's changed, and I think it is going to, like in the next 3 years, it's really critical to have flexibility. So, know what your strengths are, mm-hmm. right? And know what you want to do, but also be flexible in sort of maybe leveraging your strengths to do something that you didn't think that you wanted to do. And it might be a growth opportunity. And, also when you're looking at, comp, right? Especially if you're working for smaller companies, talk about, hey, you're flexible in terms of salary and margin-based or, equity-based, and I think you'll get further along in the conversation if there's flexibility there in the long run.
Yeah, I think it's important to prioritize, right? What is the sort of company that you want to work in? What is the type of work that you want to do? How much money do you want to make? How much flexibility you want to have? And then you ultimately have to make choices because there aren't a lot of opportunities that are going to check all of those boxes, right? So you have to prioritize and think through what that means for you and then make decisions about what to pursue or accept based on that.
What about for that same person who's thinking about finding something else? Should they stay in their current job and secretly go look for something else, or you think it's best to leave and have full transparency around what they're doing and doing it out in the open versus job hunting while they're somewhere else?
I think from a top talent perspective, something that Angela already mentioned, top talent will always have opportunities. And I think, they should be open about what they're looking for because the market, will provide for that top talent. It's the middle that will struggle, I think, in the future, or at least for the next couple of years. And they need to be really clear about, that, okay, if they're looking, give a time frame of what they're looking for and set a time frame, be open about it with your employer, but also let them know how serious you are, because if it's like, hey, I'm just looking, that's a different conversation than, I've put a timeline of 3 months and, I really want to do something different in 3 months. And that kind of puts the employer on alert. And if you are top talent, it's like, okay, well, I need to get a development opportunity for this person.
I have found that the folks who are really wanting to drive their career are having those conversations before they get to the point of taking another job, right? That there should be these open conversations that are happening around, like you said, Jolly. What am I looking for? Where do I want to grow? And if you don't feel comfortable having those conversations, then you have to ask yourself why. And is this the right place for me, right? Why is that uncomfortable? Why do I not want to talk to my leader about where I want to grow and develop? is just really important. But it's always, if you can find a way to grow and with your current company and you want to grow there, that's always a great thing too. You should just be really clear about what your goals are.
Great, thank you. The kind of the siren song of the startup world is quite strong, and not everybody fully knows what they're getting into when they leave a mid-sized company or a larger company to go to a startup. But nonetheless, a lot of people say, hey, I'd like to go do that. I'd like to have higher impact, work in a smaller organization, et cetera, et cetera. But that market is less efficient. Opportunities are harder to find. For somebody that wants to make that change and go to a smaller organization, but they're having a hard time finding a spot or finding opportunities, what should those people do?
So often if someone wants to work for a startup, they have an idea of what sort of industry or what sort of work, and then it's having a really good understanding of that and how your strengths and your skill set and the work that you do lines up with what the startup needs. And Jolly talked about being flexible, being really important, and with a startup, that's more important than maybe anywhere else, right? Because whatever role you're fulfilling in a startup, it's likely not going to be the only hat that you wear. So recognizing that you need to be flexible, and it's probably not going to happen through responding to a job posting. It's going to happen through networking and through somebody knows somebody who knows the founder who can help you get a foot in the door, and you start building a relationship. The relationships are really, really important, because if you also think about it from an entrepreneur's standpoint, if you're going to make, only a few hires, you want to make sure they're really the right people, and you want to either hire someone or someone your friend knows or someone they referred who they've done work for before. So thinking about the relationships is really, really important. And then the flexibility is just super critical, and making sure that what you're offering matches up with what their needs are.
Well, I'm always looking to add on people for the ventures that I do. And the one thing that I look for, of course, is flexibility, but also, can they come in a fractional way? And then it's that try before you buy. And you can really understand then if your values line up. And when you are part of a small company, it is so very important that the values truly align, because if they don't, it can be toxic, very toxic. So I think the single most important thing when you're hiring or you're looking for a job at a startup is also you proactively research and find out if the values, the mission, all of those things in the company, and even the personalities of people that work there, are things that you can actually gel with. I mean, this is like you're working together for long hours. This is not sexy work. This is, it's hard work, and it is stressful. So pick people that you want to work with in those situations. And it both from an employer and an employee standpoint.
Great, thank you. All right, 2 quick questions, lightning round, 30-second response, please, as we're pushing up on the 1 o'clock hour. What was a piece of business advice that you got that you wish you would have heard earlier in your career?
Flexible.
The flexibility, and then just understanding the needs. Like I talked about earlier, related to mistakes.
All right. And then if you wanted to sum up today's conversation in kind of one key takeaway for our audience, what would that one takeaway be?
I think, focusing on, again, starting, up front or upstream in terms of brand strategy, capabilities. I think that needs to be all flushed out before you get to the people capability piece of it. And I think that's one thing that you should focus on.
Yeah, and being really flexible in the way that you think about building people capabilities and not always thinking of it in terms of how many people do I need to go hire now, but being flexible and really strategic and creative about it.
Great, thank you. All right, May 4th is our next time here. So just a few weeks from now, we're going to be talking about the evolution of sales and customer relationships. Again, this was kind of bookending off of the marketing with meeting that we did earlier. I want to thank you both so much for being here. It was a great conversation. Always good to learn about how to better handle people, especially in a tough job and labor environment. So Angela and Jolly, thank you very much.